Hey everyone, for those of you who haven't been here before, my name is Derek Royden. I write a regular story every week for a website called nationofchange.org. If you've never visited the site, you should definitely check it out. You can also find links to my stories if you're here on the vlog, and if you're on YouTube, one of the few people who check this out on YouTube, you can find a link to the blog below, and then you'll come here and be able to check out the stories, or just go to nationofchange.org. So for today's vlog story, I do one of these usually every week. We're going to look at a story that was in Eon magazine. It's kind of a magazine, it's a website. It's kind of a semi-academic site. There's really interesting stuff on there. There was a story I read recently about Boudica. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. She was a English queen who fought against the Romans. Really interesting story her life is. And there was another story on whether elephants deserve personhood, which was also really interesting. So it's that kind of stuff. You can find a link to the website also. There's a sidebar on the right hand side. There's these little rectangles. You just click that. There's links to a bunch of different websites where you can get news and different things like the Eon site is not really a news site. So this story, I actually got it on Alternet. I couldn't actually find it on the Eon website, but it's about the idea of if racist and sexist philosophers can still be admirable. It's by a British writer named Julian Baggini, and he begins thus. Admiring the great thinkers of the past has become morally hazardous. Praise Immanuel Kant, and you might be reminded that he believed that humanity is at its greatest perfection in the race of the whites, and the yellow Indians do have a meager talent. Laud Aristotle, and you'll have to explain how a genuine sage could have thought that the male is by nature superior and the female inferior, the male ruler and the female subject. Write a eulogy to David Hume, as I recently did here, and you'll be attacked for singing the praises of someone who wrote in 1753-54, I am apt to suspect I won't use that word, and in general all other species of men to be naturally inferior to the whites. We seem to be caught in a dilemma. We can't just dismiss the unacceptable prejudices of the past as unimportant, but if we think that holding morally objectionable views disqualifies anyone from being considered a great thinker or a political leader, then there's hardly anyone from history left. It's interesting because I was thinking the other day, or I was watching a video, and someone brought up the fact that Descartes, the French philosopher of I Think, Therefore I Am fame, had said that animals are basically nothing more than machines. This excuses so many terrible things that are done to our non-human friends. And it's the interesting idea that some of these really highly praised speakers from the past, I'm less praising them as Baggini does here. I'm a little bit skeptical. Of course, they should still be read, but it should also be recognized that how dangerous in the long term some of the ideas that these men, and they're almost all men, although we'll get to another position that he takes after, how dangerous some of their views were, and it's important that we discuss this. I mean, we can't forget, of course, the greatness of figures from the past, but Baggini goes on. The problem does not go away if you exclude dead white establishment males. Racism was common in the women's suffrage movement on both sides of the Atlantic. The American suffragette Carrie Chapman Catt said that white supremacy will be strengthened, not weakened, by women's suffrage. Emmeline Pankhurst, her British sister in the struggle, became a vociferous supporter of colonialism, denying that it was something to decry and something to be ashamed of, and insisting instead that it is a great thing to be the inheritors of an empire like ours. Both sexism and xenophobia have been common in the trade union movement, all in the name of defending the rights of workers, male, non-immigrant workers, that is. I was watching a thing about Cesar Chavez, and he was actually against illegal immigration. I mean, I think I'm simplifying his case because he felt that at that time, that it was making it harder for union workers or for farm workers to unionize. Of course, that's not really a problem so much anymore as basically hardly anyone's unionized anymore anyway. And really, unfortunately, that struggle didn't last very long. However, the idea that racist, sexist, or otherwise bigoted views automatically disqualify a historical, and I should say about Chavez as well, that he's being used by people on the right now as kind of a to kind of get across some of their ideas about immigration, which we of course don't agree with, because these are human beings. Even people who come due to poverty, even people who cross borders due to poverty, I mean, we have a moral obligation to look out for other people and look after other people. I just truly believe that. However, the idea that racist, sexist, or otherwise bigoted views automatically disqualify a historical figure from admiration is misguided. Anyone who cannot bring themselves to admire such a historical figure betrays a profound lack of understanding about just how socially conditioned all our minds are, even the greatest, because the prejudice seems so self-evidently wrong. They just cannot imagine how anyone could fail to see this without being depraved. Their outrage arrogantly supposes that they are so virtuous that they would never be so immoral, even when everyone around them was blind to injustice. We should know better. And this is something that's very true too. I mean, opinions that you had even in your own life that you had 20 years ago, you now look back at it and you think to yourself, well, what a terrible thing, like with members of the LGBT community. When I was younger, it was just normal to kind of look down on them, or even be afraid of them in an odd way. And it's only over the years as you realize that these are real human beings that are just like you, that face the same struggles, and some, in many ways, face much, much worse struggles, especially when they're younger. That you can get over your prejudice, but sometimes you just need someone else to explain to you, or to meet someone from a group that you have an opinion on that's been developed over time, and it's developed environmentally. Your opinions are often as much due to nurture as nature, the environment that you grow up in. Sometimes, if we look at the outpouring of support for someone like Donald Trump and his racism, there were a lot of people who just simply were not taught correctly. And I mean, it is a really sad thing. There's so much time is spent worrying about political correctness, for example, on the right. But the real problem is getting people to think actually really critically about opinions that they have about, especially if it's a whole other swath of humanity. If you really think through your prejudices, and everyone I think has some prejudices, if you really think them through, you start to see how absurd they are. Why do so many find it impossible to believe that any so-called genius could fail to see that their prejudices were irrational and immoral? One reason is that our culture has its own deep-seated and mistaken assumption that the individual is an autonomous human intellect independent from the social environment. Even a passing acquaintance with psychology, sociology, or anthropology should squash that comfortable illusion. The Enlightenment ideal that we can and should all think for ourselves should not be confused with the hyper-Enlightenment fantasy that we can think all by ourselves. Our thinking is shaped by our environment in profound ways that we often aren't even aware of. Those who refuse to accept that they are as much limited by these forces as anyone else have delusions of intellectual grandeur. When a person is so deeply embedded in an immoral system, it becomes problematic to attribute individual responsibility. This is troubling because we are wedded to the idea that the locus of moral responsibility is the perfectly autonomous individual. Were we to take the social conditioning of abhorrent beliefs and practices seriously, the fear is that everyone would be off the hook and we'd be left with a hopeless moral relativism. Our whole culture is based around this idea that we are each some perfect, autonomous, special being, on our own. But what makes us exceptional a lot of the time is the way we interact with the people around us, and the way we create small societies in the private sphere, or the way we react and how we are in public. There's a saying, a cliche, no man is an island, or no woman is an island. And this is the thinking we have to get back to, not this whole idea. And I mean, we have to go far back. But this is something we have to get back to. We have to get back to the concept of solidarity, especially on the left. It's a word that's become a buzzword again, but this is a totally positive thing because it's about empathy and compassion for other people. But the worry that we'd be unable to condemn what most needs condemnation is baseless. Misogyny and racism are no less repulsive because they are products of societies as much, if not more, than they are of individuals. To excuse Hume is not to excuse racism. To excuse Aristotle is not to excuse sexism. Racism and sexism were never okay. People simply wrongly believed that they were. So there's a little bit more to the article. You'll find a link to it below. I think that's a pretty good place to stop. Hope everyone enjoyed this video, and I want you all to remember,